Tanya Robles, and as the Associate Dean of Student Engagement, I really oversee a lot of the programs at Mount SAC that have to do with the onboarding of students, bringing in students from the community, and also some of our retention efforts in our area, including the California Promise program for the campus. I have been at Mount SAC for 14 years, and I have had, gosh, 5 different positions. So I'll be sharing a little bit about myself as we go through this presentation. I am a Salvadoran American immigrant. I came here when I was 5 years old, escaping a civil war with my family, first generation scholar, and the youngest of 3 siblings to go to college, but not the last. So even though I was the youngest, eventually my siblings are much older. They decided to also go back to school and get their degrees as well. I'm a transfer student from the community college, eventually moving on to UC Irvine, where I did my undergraduate studies, and then to Claremont Graduate University, where I got my master's. And then lastly, I'm actually a student at Cal State Fullerton. I have been trying to complete my dissertation for quite some time, and I hope that, sometime soon I can say that I finally have an EDD. It has been quite a challenge, as some of you are going to experience as you choose to go into PhD or doctoral programs, but you can definitely do it. 17 years of work experience. Prior to Mount San Antonio College, I worked at UC Irvine as a Gear Up coordinator for one of their grants. So I included a picture of this building, and this is the US Bank building. This is a very meaningful building for me. I was just in this area in downtown LA this past Saturday and saw the building and was reminded of my hopes and aspirations when I was growing up. I grew up in the city of LA, in the heart of LA, Fairfax District, and I remember being very young, having dinner, looking outside the window and looking at this building and thinking it was just such an incredible, beautiful structure. And my mother telling me that someday she hoped that I worked in a building like that I had my own office in a building like that, and that I didn't have to clean those offices, but that I was a decision maker in those offices, because my mother, that's how, she worked, was house cleaning, cleaning buildings. That's how she paid the rent. And my father had all kinds of different types of manual labor. So for them, every time I looked out at this building and I would say, gosh, it's such a beautiful building, they really wanted me to aspire to someday be a decision maker in an institution like this. So I always knew I wanted to go into higher ed. I just didn't know at what capacity. And I do not regret it whatsoever. Time has flown by, and there's been just so much work that has been accomplished. So I really hope that through this presentation today, you too can figure out how to navigate the community college work, how to come to work for us in the community colleges, and realize just the different opportunities that are available. So in this session, we're going to be talking about types of positions, even though, yes, my primary focus is going to be more like staff positions, where to find positions, how the hiring committee process works, how to build a strong application packet, because I always say that most people don't realize that there really is a very special way in which you have to put together your resume, your cover letter, and any other additional documents that community colleges are asking for in order for you to qualify for an interview. So there's a very special equation, and I'm going to share that with you today. And also even interview attire. This came up actually just a couple of weeks back in talking to my vice president and my AVP. So these are some of the classifications that exist within the community college system. We have what we call classified positions, which are support-based positions. Some of these positions require an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, and some just high school diploma, right? So it just depends. Then we have management positions, anywhere from managers to the president and the CEO. Depending on the community college system, not system, but the community college themselves, some coordinator positions are classified, but at some colleges, coordinators are actually managers, okay? So as you're applying, you're gonna see that sometimes, for example, like a director of outreach at one college that position might be the equivalent of a coordinator of outreach somewhere else. So just keep that in mind. Then we have faculty positions. We have instructional positions, and then we have non-instructional positions. So traditionally, the counseling faculty is housed within student services, but that's not at all community colleges, just at some, most of them. And then we have library faculty, right? And those are also considered non-instructional, even though they do teach, but they also are librarians as well. The last one that I didn't include on this grid is a confidential class, because that's a very small population of positions. And those are usually the executive assistants to the presidents and vice presidents, and then some supervisor positions. They're called confidential class because really they are assisting the president or the vice president, and they have to keep everything confidential and cannot share. So different types of structures, right? One of the things that I always mention is that every classification is just as important to the functioning of a college. So when you come into a community college to work there, you really have to have the mindset that whether you're classified, management, faculty, confidential, or even a student worker, we cannot operate as a community college without all these partners. So where do you find these positions? My personal favorite is honestly the California Community Colleges Registry, because you can even go ahead and do searches by region. So if you're willing to move to Northern California, you can select Northern California colleges. It's very easy to also filter by types of position if you're looking for classified work or management work, or whatever type of position you're looking for. So that to me is like the superstar for positions, because you're going to find a lot of California Community College positions under that registry, and it's very easy to navigate. Then also for those of you that have a LinkedIn account, LinkedIn is another resource. There is a section in which you can actually look for jobs, and there's a section in which it actually recommends jobs to you based off of what you have on your personal LinkedIn. So that's another excellent tool. And then of course, you can just go to the web pages for a college or the college district. So for example, if you're applying to a community college, or you're looking for positions in LA County, then you want to go to the LACCD website, right? Because there's so many community colleges that are part of that district. Some colleges like Mount San Antonio College, where I work, are a single district. So it's one district, one college. So that's another way. Usually you want to look for employment either at the top of that website for that college or district, or at the very bottom. And if not, look for human resources. And then usually within human resources, there's going to be a link to positions as well. So part of this process is understanding the hiring committee, right? And how that works. So I know that sometimes in graduate school, we're told, oh, you know, if you network and you know the right person, you can get a position like that. Well, it doesn't always work out that way, because some positions like classified staff, there's unions. Faculty have unions too. So when you have unions, of course, there's a process in place of how employees are hired to work on campus. There has to be a fair system for everyone, right? So very rarely are we able to just hire someone that we like and put into a position, because there is an actual process that the college has to follow in order for it to be a legal type hiring. So it's not that I want to discourage you from networking, but I think it is important, because you never know if some of those folks that you meet are going to be on that hiring committee. But I want to dismantle this belief that it really is just about knowing someone and getting a position. The purpose of the hiring committee is really to make sure that we have an equitable process. So the way it works is that depending on the type of position that you're applying to, the committee makeup will look different, right? So for staff positions, and when I say staff, usually it's classified positions, which are, again, our coordinators, our specialists. It's our support staff that really do like the behind the scenes work within the programs and the colleges, right? So I'll give you some examples of some of the classified staff within the areas that I oversee. We have outreach specialists. Those outreach specialists are the ones that are out at the community, at the high schools, doing the outreach for the college, presenting about the college, getting new students to come to the college. These are full-time permanent positions. These are not student positions. And at my college, an outreach specialist needs a bachelor's degree. Other type of specialist positions are admins, or what others might call a clerk or a secretary, right? A coordinator is really coordinating and creating the programs and the workshops that are a part of that program. So for a job like that, usually there is a hiring manager as part of the committee, at least another classified employee. We need to have an equal employment opportunity representative and no faculty. Okay, faculty on those hiring committees are only included for management positions and then for faculty positions. Some colleges even include a student representative on their hiring committee as well. Now, as far as for a second, let's say you make it to a second round of interviews, usually that interview is going to be with the hiring manager, a dean, a vice president, or a president. And if it's a faculty or manager position, most likely a faculty member as well, okay? So the committee makeup, that's the representatives that are there, but as far as how many people are gonna be on that committee, it looks different depending on the position. And really the committee is there to make shared decisions, to have an equal say, to help diminish any bias or nepotism. And the purpose is to find the most qualified candidates to fill that vacancy. So we really focus on candidates that value diversity, equity, and the values of the college. That is one of the main purposes of having a hiring committee. So just know, if you get a first interview, there will be multiple people. And as you're interviewing, I always suggest look at everyone. I have been a hiring manager for many different positions. And sometimes what I've noticed is that when candidates start interviewing, they only look at me because they're very positional, right? So they're thinking, oh, that's the associate dean. So they're answering the questions and only looking at me and ignoring everybody else. You know, just put yourself in the shoes of those folks that are taking the time really to be a part of this, right? So always acknowledge the entire committee, look around, just to let them know that you want to make sure that they understand what you're sharing with them too. Another thing about hiring committees is sometimes ahead of time, when a position is posted, candidates want to reach out if they know that, for example, it's a position, let's say in a bridge program, and they'll do the research and they'll find out who the manager is for, you know, that bridge program, and they'll send them an email and say, hi, I'm applying to the position. Can I, you know, take some time to talk to you about the position? I'd like to get more information. Just know that there are legal reasons why we cannot actually meet with potential candidates. So usually somebody's going to say, you know, I'm sorry, I'm serving on the committee. I'm unable to provide any insight. It's not that that person doesn't want to help you. It's just that, again, they are trying to create a fair opportunity for everyone, right? So I'm looking at the screen. So let's say Carolina connects with me and I give her information about that position, and then Andres didn't have that opportunity with me and they both applied to the same position. By me giving information to Carolina, that's already putting her at an advantage, and it wouldn't be an equitable practice. So just know that we don't really answer any questions in advance if you're applying for a position. So what I always recommend is look at the website, go through the website. You know, you can call that department and ask questions and just say, hi, you know, I'm interested in your program, to find out more about that program, or the same thing goes for the college. So there are other ways in which you can get information, right, about a position that you're interested in. So this is the hiring committee duties. And I always share this because I really want, young professionals to understand what the process is like for hiring. So the hiring committee duties are really to determine what's called criteria for application review based on the job description. And I'm going to give you examples of that very shortly. But really that hiring committee, what they do is they look at the job description of the vacancy, the position that we're hiring for, and they decide what are the 6 to 10 key things about this position that are really crucial that we want to find evidence of in the applicant's application packet. Then what they do is they also review the candidate's application packets. And what they do with that is they score those packets based on the 6 to 10 criteria that they came up with as a group. Okay. Then they decide who to interview based on how the candidate scored on the criteria. And then the other thing they do is they create the interview materials. So they create the interview questions that are relevant for that specific position. If there's going to be a presentation as part of that process, they create the presentation prompt as well. If there's going to be a writing assignment, they decide, should there be a writing assignment based on the specific position? And if so, they create the prompt for that too. Okay, so everything is very unique to that specific position. And that's why it's so important for all of you as candidates, when you're applying for a position, to really look at the job description. And for yourself, ask yourself, do I see myself having the experience, right? Or the transferable skills for this position? And what stands out about this job description that I think is going to be really important, so that as you're crafting your resume, your cover letter, you're literally connecting your personal experience and background to that job description. So I've had people in the past apply for positions, and it's very obvious that they're using the same resume, the same cover letter for different positions. If it does not connect to the job description, if you're not showing evidence of that, unfortunately, what's going to happen is you're not going to score very high, and you're very unlikely to be forwarded for an interview. Okay, so pay attention to those job descriptions and think about, how do I connect my experiences and what I've done to what this job is looking for? This is a hiring timeline. So, and this is specific, to Mount SAC. It might look different somewhere else, but right now it's not unlikely that if you apply for a position, it may take several months for you to hear back. It is so unfortunate. I have served on committees in which, from the time that the position opened up to us actually hiring someone, it's been like 6 months. Okay, so part of it, I think, in the pandemic, there have been additional challenges. But one of the biggest challenges is sometimes getting enough people to be a part of a hiring committee, because in the community colleges, we're always working on multiple things. Everybody's always so busy. So really, when you serve on a hiring committee, this is like additional to your duties. And sometimes it's really hard to get people to be willing to serve on hiring committees, especially when the college is hiring for a lot of positions. So that is one of the biggest challenges. The first thing that hiring committee does is they have an orientation date in which they, meet and go over the different rules and what they're going to be doing as a committee. Then the second time they meet is really more about online application screening. So after the initial orientation, then they have to look through all of the applicants that made the minimum requirements, that met the minimum requirements for the specific position. I want to share with you that it's really important for you to pay attention to the minimum requirements that are being asked for a specific position, because if for some reason you don't meet the minimum requirements, then you won't be forwarded for consideration for application screening. So for example, If one of the jobs that you're applying for is asking for a master's, right? And you don't have your master's, you're like in, your second year working towards your master's. Unfortunately, you will not qualify for screening. So the committee will never see your application because HR will not forward your application. Or conversely, I've had candidates before that have doctorates that are PhDs, and they're applying for a classified specialist position, but maybe one of the minimum requirements is a bachelor's and 2 years of experience, right? And that applicant that has a PhD might not have 2 years of work experience. So even though they have a doctorate, they still will not make it through the minimum requirements and will not be forwarded to the hiring committee. So be very intentional. I always tell folks, first, look at the job. Does it seem like something I want to do? Because that's important, right? You want to do work that's meaningful to you. You want to do work, you want to work in an area in which you're going to be able to give back, and that area is going to be able to also give back to you. So pay attention to that, and then look at the minimum requirements. Do you meet the minimum requirements? If you do, then of course, move forward with the process. If you don't, then I wouldn't want you to spend, an hour or 2 hours putting together an application packet for a position that the committee is never going to actually see. So the online application screening, usually depending on how many applications the committee has to get through, it could be anywhere from 1 week to 3 weeks that committee is looking at applications. Then they meet. The compilation review is where they come together and they all share their scores for each candidate. And then they talk about, based off of the top scores, right, from the criteria, these are the ones that scored the highest in criteria. Who are the folks we want to provide a first interview to? They talk about it, they come up with the list, and then they make the recommendations to HR. From there, there's a primary day of interviews, so the first interviews. For some positions, it's only 1 interview. Depending on the college at Mount SAC, it's always 2 interviews. We always make sure to have a second interview, but at other colleges, sometimes it's just 1 interview, and you don't actually meet with a VP or the president or a dean. And then from there, the committee, after the first day of interviews, then again, they have a discussion based off of who we interviewed. Who do we want to push for final interviews or a second interview? And usually by then, it's a much smaller population. In the second interviews, like I mentioned, it's going to be the hiring manager, usually a dean, the vice president, or the president, depending on the position. And then from there, once a candidate is selected, they're contacted, they're made the job offer, right? And as candidates, you'll decide if you want to take the job or not. I do want to share that you are within your right to negotiate. I always say this because I feel that most first-gen students and most people of color, right? It's not something that we're taught. We're taught to be grateful for the jobs that we have. And we should be grateful, right? But at the same time, we have to understand that we bring value to positions, right? That they're lucky to have us in these positions too. So it's okay for you to say, I'm really interested, but who can I talk to about negotiating, right? And think about also, if this is your first job and you don't have any experience, well, you're probably not going to be able to negotiate. But if you have some experience, even if it's part-time experience, why not try, right? Why not talk to human resources and talk about potentially starting at a higher pay? The worst thing that can happen is they can tell you no, right? But I really want to encourage you to do that. And then if you want to continue and you want to work for the college, then they'll, just work with you to do the paperwork. So this is the entire hiring process for community colleges. The application screening criteria that I keep mentioning, this is an example of it, right? So remember how I mentioned as a hiring committee, they decide what are the 6 to 10 key areas that we really want to focus on when we're examining and scoring these applicants. So this is an example of a position. For this position, evidence of operating modern office equipment, evidence of experience in coordinating multiple calendars, evidence of operating, oh, I think I just copied and pasted the same thing. But this is most likely, from looking at even just this small criteria, most likely an admin position, okay? So most likely a classified specialist, and that is an admin / a clerk secretary. So now, since the committee created this criteria, they're going to look at all the applicants and rate them based on this criteria. We take the criteria from the job description. So it's not that they just come up with new things. They literally look through the job description, and then they decide what are the most important things that we need these candidates to show evidence of, because we need them to have, you know, the work experience necessary to do a good job. So getting ready to apply. Look for positions. I already mentioned to you different ways and in which you can look for positions. Also ask your friends, right? Ask your networks if they know of any work. Review the job description. Again, consider, is this job something that is aligned with the experience that I already have? Work experience, and it can even be student worker experience as well. Do I want this job? I'm really big on that, right? I understand that sometimes, you know, folks will come to me and say, I have bills to pay, like I really need a job. I get it. We need that in order to be able to function. But also be mindful of picking a program or a college where you see yourself so that you can have that added value to your life. Does it align with my values, right? Think about it. Like, is that place, based on what you've heard of it or your own research, a place that aligns with your own personal values? And think about what you can contribute as well to that position. Look for patterns. If the job description keeps mentioning a job function repeatedly, it's most likely very important to that role, right? So if there is a position, for example, that keeps talking about presenting, that keeps talking about facilitating workshops over and over again, then obviously for that position, there's going to be a lot of presentations that you're going to have to do, or you're going to have to facilitate workshops, right? So look for patterns within the job description. Again, review minimum qualifications. I think I've already mentioned that several times, of making sure that you meet the minimum qualifications for that position. Review the application deadline. So nowadays it's very common that when you're looking for a position, some of them will say the deadline to apply is this date by this time. I will tell you that sometimes when we're college students, deadlines aren't exactly deadlines. Our professors sometimes are very kind and still take our work late. When it comes to applying for the colleges, no, they will not. If you applied after the deadline, that is not going to be included in revision for or review for the hiring committee. Now, if it says initial screening date for priority consideration, okay, so let's say you're applying for a position and it says priority consideration deadline of next Friday, right? And let's just say, oh my gosh, it's Sunday and you just found out about this position, right? It happens sometimes that you find out after the fact. It's okay if you still submit that application, because what may happen is the committee will look at everybody that met the minimum quals and that made it by the initial screening date. And if they feel that that pool of candidates is not very strong, then what they'll say is to human resources, give us also those that applied after the priority consideration deadline that meet the minimum quals, and then they'll review those. Okay, so again, that is the second opportunity. Review your letter of recommendations. So some colleges require letters of rec and some don't, and it will be clear on the job posting if you need that. So what I always recommend is if it doesn't require it, right? But when you look at the application itself, there's a opportunity to still add additional supporting documents. It doesn't hurt to add a letter of recommendation, right? So even if it's not required, what I always say, if there's an opportunity for you to provide one, why not? Okay, take a look at that. Also, take a look at if they are requiring letters of rec, how are they to be submitted? Every college is different. Some of them, you as the candidate has to send a link to that person that's going to do the recommendation, and then they provide directly the letter of rec. Others can provide it to you, and then you upload it into your application. So always take a look at that ahead of time, because you never want to be caught off guard, that you think, oh, I'll be able to just, upload it myself. And then lo and behold, it's 11:30, you got to submit by midnight. And no, it was supposed to be the person writing the letter for you that submits it, right? So always look at that ahead of time. Give people time to write those letters of rec. Ask in advance when possible. And I say when possible because sometimes we don't find out about opportunities right away, right? We find out last minute and it's like, what? In 2 days, I have to submit everything? So let your recommenders know, hey, I just found out about this. But ideally, give them 2 to 3 weeks, because sometimes, I know for myself, sometimes I've had within like a 2-week period, like 4 different people ask me for letters of rec, right? And then as your recommenders, we want to make sure that we're providing you a strong letter of recommendation. And ask people, can you provide me a strong letter of recommendation? Not just a letter of recommendation. I've had throughout my career only 2 people that I honestly said, I don't think I'm the best person to write a letter of recommendation for you. One of them, because I knew their work style and I knew that they weren't very reliable. I knew things about them that they probably would have made it very difficult for me to write a strong letter of recommendation. The other person that I said no to, it's because I didn't really know them. I had never really had an opportunity to work with them. So I wouldn't be able to write a strong letter of rec, right? So when you're requesting them, remember, ask for a strong letter of recommendation. And if they say no, don't take it personal. You want people that are going to hype you up, that are going to say how great you are, right? Not someone that's going to write just basically off of a template, because as a hiring committee, they'll be able to see through that. And then really craft your application packet to match the job description. If you get anything from my presentation today, it's that. Please do not submit an application that looks the same for every position that you're applying for. Because I'm telling you from experience, unfortunately, you won't be selected if your application, your resume, your cover letter does not align with the job description. What do you provide to your letter of recommendation writers? I really love it when students send me a copy of the job description they're applying for, their most updated resume. Even if it's a draft, it's okay. To let them know this is a draft. I'm still working on it. And then a cover letter, if the job is asking for a cover letter, and it's okay for you to send a draft to your letters of recommendation writers, okay? So that helps, right? Because then for myself, when an applicant gives me that information, then when I'm writing the letter of recommendation, I think about, okay, what is this job description looking for? And what are the qualities that I know about this person that aligns to this? So that, again, it's more evidence that you can do the job. So let's review a position. This is an administrative specialist level 3 at Mount SAC, which is similar again to, at some other colleges, they might call it a clerk. This type of position does a lot with data. They do a lot with dealing with fiscal services, taking minutes at meetings, different types of different duties. But what I want you to look at is you want to look at time percent, right? So it says 55%. So obviously this is a part-time position. If it said 100%, then it'll be full-time. It tells you if it's a classified position, how many months that position is for. So it's a 12-month position. And then the current work schedule. So this is what they're looking for. Okay. Now, let's say the current work schedule doesn't align with your availability, but you're still interested in applying. Apply, because possibly if you get the position, that could be negotiated. Okay. It will tell you the step range. So every college is different. At Mount SAC, for classified positions, there's 6 different steps, 6 different ranges that people can get paid. And then every year, after they've been there a year, they get to the next step, right? So every year you're getting basically an increase in pay. But for this one, they're just giving you the range. So if you apply for this, you make anywhere from $2,500 to $3,100 per month. It tells you when the position opened, and then look at the application procedure, tells you what you need to do in order to apply for this position. I don't think I have, what I don't have on here on the slideshow is the next portion of this will show you what are the minimum qualifications this position is looking for. If a position says 2 years of work experience in a related field, okay, and let's say you have 4 years of experience, but it's all part-time, okay, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to qualify for this. Usually when they say like 2 years or 4 years, they mean full-time experience. But what you can do is call human resources. Because for example, at some colleges, if they're asking for 2 years of work experience, but you have 4 years of part-time work experience, they're like, that's still the equivalent of 2 full years. So if you're not sure if you meet the years requirement, just contact human resources. Give them a call and say, hi, you know, I'm calling about the Administrative Specialist 3 opening. I noticed that the minimum qualifications are 2 years. I have 4 years of part-time experience. Would that qualify? And they're going to tell you yes or no. And if it's a yes, then you can definitely apply, right? It'll also give you a job description as far as what are the duties. It'll tell you on this posting the skill sets that you need to have as well, right? So look at the skills, the necessary skills for the job. So crafting your resume, again, think about your own professional and educational experience and how it fits to the position. Outline, examine the job description and highlight. I tell people this all the time. Print out that job description that you're applying to and highlight and outline the duties, the skills, and the knowledge areas that it's asking for that reflect your own experience, right? So for example, if it's saying on the duties, right? If it says event planning, event coordination, putting together events, and you have that experience, then highlight that, right? So that once you create your resume, you remember, okay, I got to talk about this in my resume. That's the easiest way to do it. Then once you've already reflected on your own experience and how your experience relates to the position that you're applying for, once you've created that outline of highlighting directly on the job description, the different skills, duties, and knowledge that you have from your past experience that align to this job, then you can start inputting that information into your resume. I always recommend using similar language, okay, to what's on the job description. So if it says coordinated, facilitated, use similar language, okay? Because then for the hiring committee, it'll be easier for them to identify like, oh, you know, Nelson said that he's coordinated this, and this is exactly what we're looking for. So use similar language. I don't recommend copying and pasting from the job description. I've seen some people do that. Just, you know, paraphrase right? Based on your own job description. And be honest, don't make up any information, or do not, write something that you actually don't have experience in, because I guarantee you that it will come out once you start working in that job. And you don't want to do that for yourself, and you don't want to do that for the area that's hiring you as well. So other recommendations regarding the resume: keep it simple and to the point. Think about it this way. I recently reviewed, how many? 96 application packets for a specialist position. I was on the hiring committee. So I had to look at 96 resumes, 96 cover letters, right? 96 transcripts. That's a lot to look through in 2 weeks, right? So you want to make it as easy as possible for people on hiring committees to be able to find the information that they're looking for. Use a font that is easy to read. And it's okay if you go beyond the 1 page. I feel that a lot of master's programs are teaching their students that everything has to be on 1 page. Not necessarily, okay? We want you to be concise, but we also want to make sure that you show, right, that you have the experience for these jobs. And sometimes you're not going to be able to do that on a 1-pager. I know they also talk about like 1-inch margins. It's okay if you use narrow margins. Believe me, as a hiring committee, we don't take those things into consideration. What we're looking for is evidence that you have the background, the desire, right, to do this position. Stay away from anything decorative or using colors. I've seen some too that have like colors, and honestly, we're not going to score you higher because your resume looks pretty and has colors and tables, right? Again, you just want to make it as simple as possible and easy for the hiring committee to find the information. You don't necessarily have to include your mailing address at the top or your job objective. This is my personal opinion, because your mailing address, you're already putting it in the application packet, right? In the actual online application that you're submitting. So your resume doesn't necessarily have to have that. And then the job objective, it's not exactly necessary, because the job objective is going to come out in your cover letter as well, right? So it's very repetitive. If the application requests a cover letter or personal interest statement, again, your objective will be reflected in your narrative of that. When you're creating your resume for any past positions that you've had, any past experience, use language, right? Like coordinated, presented, past tense. So make sure that you pay attention to that. And then for current positions, you want to use present tense. So if you're working right now and you want to say support, present, right? But if you're no longer working at that job, it's supported, presented. After your education and work experience section, include any supplemental information that you feel is relevant to the position, right? So let's say you presented at a conference. You want to put your conference presentations. If it was for an organization, so for example, if it was for NASPA, right? You want to put NASPA, the year. If it was Western Regional or National, the presentation title, so that they know that you've presented. If you're a part of a community organization, right, you want to include that if you feel it's relevant as supplemental information for your application. Any committee participation too, if you've been on committees, you can use that as well as supplemental information on your resume. Remember that your resume is a living document, right? So if you created a resume from a year ago, it's time to revisit it now. And again, it's going to shift and change depending on the position that you're applying for. So I just helped someone with a dream specialist application. Prior to that, they had applied to an honor specialist position. And of course, the honor specialist position, when they applied for it, it reflected that, right? But now that they're applying for dream, So now that candidate had to reflect a little bit about what work experience I have working with Dreamers, right? So one of the things they shared is, oh, I'm actually part of a community organization that advocates for undocumented immigrants, right? Great. Then let's put that on your resume as part of community involvement, and it's related to the dream presentation. So again, remember, your resume should never stay the same, because every time you're applying for a different position, you want to make sure that you change it. I already talked about, you don't have to limit yourself to one page. You're not going to submit a 40-page resume, right? This is not your master's thesis, but just be clear, concise, and make sure that everything that you're sharing, right, is relevant to the job that you're applying for. It's okay to repeat the information from your resume and your application. So I've seen people that on their application, the online application, sometimes it will ask, give us a list of your duties and responsibilities within these positions, and then they'll put see resume. Don't do that, okay? Because again, as the hiring committee, we're scoring you based on criteria and evidence. The more we see evidence of whatever criteria we develop, then the higher you're going to score, okay? So even if whatever you put on your application may seem repetitive to what you're putting on your resume, that's perfectly fine, okay? And then have a peer or colleague review your resume or cover letter before submitting. You have no idea how many folks at Mount SAC that were students at one point or another that I know, and then went off and transferred and got their undergrad. I've seen a lot of them apply for positions and never asked anyone at Mount SAC that they know to review their applications before submitting. And I always think, my gosh, you know, so many of us at the campus that could have provided some insight, right? So don't fall into that yourself. You know, have a peer look at it, or have a colleague or a friend or one of your mentors look at it. Tap into your networks, because they can really provide you a lot of good feedback. And then ultimately, you know, don't give up. Stay positive. Securing a position takes time. It really does. It's going to take several attempts or not, right? Some of you might have it right from your first application or your first position that you apply to, but usually it does take some time. I know for myself, when I finished my undergrad at UCI, it took me, I think, 8 months to finally get a full-time permanent position as a coordinator. And I was really just frustrated, right, with not having a position. It took some time. So be patient with yourself. You should be very proud that you're working on your master's degrees, but even with the master's degree, it might take some time for you to secure that full-time position, right? So stay positive, keep moving forward, and then just keep tapping into those folks that are available and willing to help you as well.